Sometimes the most unlikely heroes wear leather jackets and ride motorcycles. What happens when a group of bullies thinks they can humiliate a disabled veteran in broad daylight? They're about to learn that respect isn't negotiable, and some lessons are taught by the most unexpected teachers. Before we begin, comment below where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel. Your every comment, gift, and membership helps us bring more heartfelt stories to your life. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Murphy's Diner, a weathered establishment on the outskirts of Denver, where truckers and travelers stopped for coffee and conversation. Marissa Martinez wheeled herself through the automatic doors, her military-issued wheelchair moving smoothly across the worn linoleum. At 28, she carried herself with quiet dignity, despite the challenges that had changed her life forever. 3 years had passed since the roadside bomb in Afghanistan took her legs and her career as a combat medic. The physical wounds had healed, but the invisible scars ran deeper. Today was different, though. Today marked her first venture out alone since moving to this small town. Her therapist had encouraged these small steps toward independence. But Marissa's hands trembled slightly as she approached the counter. The diner buzzed with the usual morning crowd, construction workers grabbing coffee, elderly locals sharing gossip, and a few families with children. Marissa ordered her usual black coffee and wheat toast, settling into a corner booth where she could observe without drawing attention to herself. 20 minutes into her peaceful breakfast, the atmosphere shifted as 4 young men burst through the doors, their laughter too loud, their movements too aggressive. They wore expensive athletic wear and carried themselves with the entitled swagger of those who had never faced real consequences. The leader, a tall blonde with cold blue eyes, scanned the room like a predator sizing up prey. His name was Tyler Hoffman, son of a local real estate mogul, known around town for his family's money and his own troublemaking reputation. His companions, Jake, Marcus, and Brett, followed his lead without question, feeding off his confidence and cruelty. They had been drinking despite the early hour, celebrating what they called their gap year before Daddy's connections secured their college futures. Tyler's gaze landed on Marissa, and something ugly flickered across his face. He whispered something to his friends, and their laughter took on a different quality, sharper, meaner. Marissa felt their attention like a weight on her shoulders, her instincts from the battlefield suddenly alert. She had faced enemy fire, but this felt different, more personal, more humiliating. The group approached her table with deliberate slowness, their footsteps heavy against the floor. Other diners began to notice, conversations dying as tension filled the air. Tyler stopped directly in front of Marissa's table, his shadow falling across her breakfast. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying the particular brand of cruelty that comes from privilege unchecked. "Look what we have here, boys. A real-life war hero." His tone dripped with mock respect that fooled no one. "Tell me, soldier girl, how does it feel to be half the person you used to be?" Marissa's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down, her military training warring with her civilian restraint. She had learned to pick her battles, to ignore the stares and whispered comments. But something about Tyler's presence felt different, more dangerous, more persistent. "I'm just trying to have my breakfast," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her chest. "Please leave me alone." Tyler's grin widened, feeding off her discomfort like a parasite. His friends circled closer, creating a wall of intimidation around her table. "Leave you alone?" Tyler laughed, a sound devoid of genuine humor. "But we're just getting started. I bet you miss running. Don't you miss dancing? Miss being a whole person?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. "I bet you miss feeling like a real woman." The words hit Marissa like physical blows, each one carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage. Around them, The diner had gone silent, other patrons watching with a mixture of horror and helplessness. The elderly waitress behind the counter reached for the phone, but Tyler's father's influence ran deep in this town. Who would she call? Marissa's hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white against the table's surface. Every fiber of her being wanted to fight back, to show these boys what a real soldier could do, even from a wheelchair. But she also knew the reality of her situation. 4 against 1. No backup, no escape route. "What's wrong?" Tyler continued, sensing her internal struggle. "Cat got your tongue? Or maybe the bomb got that too." The cruelty of the comment sent ripples of shock through the watching crowd. An elderly man at the counter started to rise from his stool, but his wife grabbed his arm, fear evident in her eyes. Tyler's reputation for retaliation was well known, and his family's money bought him immunity from most consequences. Marissa closed her eyes, drawing on the meditation techniques her therapist had taught her. She thought of her fallen comrades, of the oath she had taken to serve and protect. They wouldn't want her to respond with violence, no matter how justified it might feel. She opened her eyes, meeting Tyler's gaze with quiet strength. "I served my country with honor," she said, her voice carrying across the silent diner. "I saved lives, including people like you who don't deserve the freedom I fought to protect. Your words can't touch what I've accomplished, or who I am." The dignity in her response only seemed to enrage Tyler further. He kicked one of the extra chairs at her table, sending it clattering across the floor. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a broken toy that nobody wants anymore." That's when Jake, emboldened by Tyler's escalating aggression, made a fatal mistake. He reached for Marissa's wheelchair, his hands gripping the handles as if to tip it backward. "Maybe we should help her feel more grounded," he sneered, applying pressure that made the chair rock slightly. The movement triggered something primal in Marissa, a flashback to the moment her world had exploded in fire and metal. Her breathing became rapid, her vision tunneled, and for a moment, she was back in that desert, helpless and afraid. The PTSD episode was brief but visible, and Tyler's group erupted in laughter at her distress. But their laughter died abruptly as the diner's front door opened with such force that it slammed against the wall. The sound cut through their cruel amusement like a blade, and every head turned toward the entrance. What they saw there changed everything. 6 figures stood silhouetted against the morning sun, their leather jackets and riding boots marking them as members of something far more dangerous than Tyler's privileged gang. The lead figure stepped forward, removing his sunglasses to reveal eyes that had seen real violence and real consequence. The man's name was Marcus Steele Rodriguez, a Vietnam veteran who had found brotherhood and purpose with the Denver chapter of the Hells Angels. At 55, his weathered face told stories of battles fought and wars survived. His jacket bore patches that spoke of loyalty, service, and an unbreakable code of honor. Behind him stood his brothers, men who had chosen this life, this family, this protection of those who couldn't protect themselves. Steele's gaze swept the scene in an instant. The overturned chair, Marissa's pale face, the aggressive posture of the 4 young men. His experience in combat zones had taught him to read situations quickly and accurately. What he saw here wasn't just bullying. It was predatory behavior that demanded immediate response. "Gentlemen," Steele said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had commanded respect in life and death situations, "I think there's been some confusion here. You seem to be bothering this lady." Tyler, still drunk on his own perceived power, made the mistake of treating these men like the local authorities he was used to intimidating. "This is none of your business, old man. Why don't you and your costume party find somewhere else to play biker?" The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. Steele's expression didn't change, but something subtle shifted in his posture, a coiling of potential energy that every combat veteran would recognize. His brothers spread out slightly, not threatening, but positioning themselves with military precision. "Son," Steele said, his voice still conversational, but carrying an undertone that made smart people pay attention. "I'm going to give you one chance to apologize to this lady and walk away. Consider it a learning opportunity." Tyler's friends began to sense the shift in dynamics, their bravado wilting under the steady gaze of men who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. But Tyler, blinded by years of consequence-free cruelty, doubled down on his aggression. "Or what?" he challenged, puffing out his chest. "You'll beat up some college kids? Real tough, Grandpa. My father owns half this town. You touch me, and you'll regret it." Steele smiled then, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a man who had faced real enemies and emerged victorious. "Son, your daddy's money doesn't mean much to men who've seen what real power looks like." The standoff stretched for several heartbeats, the entire diner holding its breath. Marissa watched from her table. Her PTSD episode passed, but her heart still racing. Something about these leather-clad strangers felt different from the countless times people had promised to help, but ultimately walked away when things got complicated. Steele took a step closer to Tyler, and the younger man finally began to understand that he had miscalculated badly. These weren't the local police who could be bought, or school administrators who could be intimidated with legal threats. These were men who operated by a different code entirely. "Here's what's going to happen," Steele continued, his voice never rising above conversational level. "You're going to apologize to this lady, and I mean a real apology, not some smart-ass comment. Then you're going to pay for her breakfast and leave. And if I ever hear of you bothering her again or anyone like her, we'll have a much longer conversation." Tyler looked around desperately, seeking some escape from the situation he had created. But the other diners weren't offering any support. If anything, they seemed to be silently cheering for the bikers. "This is insane," Tyler stammered, his voice cracking slightly. "You can't just threaten people like this. I'll call the police." One of Steele's brothers, a massive man with graying beard and arms covered in military tattoos, chuckled softly. "Go ahead, kid. Call them. Tell them how you were terrorizing a disabled veteran and some concerned citizens stepped in to help." The logic of the situation finally began to penetrate Tyler's alcohol-clouded judgment. His friends were already backing toward the door, their survival instincts overriding their loyalty to his leadership. Jake, who had grabbed Marissa's wheelchair, looked like he might be sick. Marissa herself remained silent, watching the drama unfold with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. She had been in firefights where the stakes were life and death, but there was something almost artistic about the way these men controlled the situation without raising their voices or making overt threats. Steele pulled out his wallets and placed a $20 bill on Marissa's table. "Ma'am, your breakfast is on us today, and I want you to know that not everyone in this town thinks it's okay to treat our veterans like this." The gesture broke something inside Tyler's remaining resistance. Faced with the clear moral authority of men who were protecting, rather than attacking, his privileged worldview began to crumble. He looked at Marissa, really looked at her for the first time, and saw not a target, but a person who had sacrificed more than he could imagine. He started, then stopped, the words catching in his throat. The apology that Steele had demanded seemed impossible, not because he was too proud, but because he was finally understanding the magnitude of what he had done. Marissa saw his struggle, and with the compassion that had made her an excellent medic, decided to help him find his way to redemption. "It's okay," she said quietly. "Just say you're sorry and mean it. That's all anyone can ask." The simple grace of her words seemed to unlock something in Tyler. Tears began to flow down his cheeks as the full weight of his actions hit him. Here was someone who had given everything for her country, who faced daily challenges he couldn't imagine, and he had chosen to make her suffering worse for his own amusement. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and for the first time in his life, he truly meant it. Steele studied Tyler's face, his experienced eyes reading the genuine remorse there. This was what he had hoped for. Not just compliance, but actual understanding. In his years with the Angels, he had learned that real change came from internal transformation, not external force. "That's a start," Steele said, his voice gentler now. "But sorry isn't enough by itself. What matters is what you do next." He turned to Marissa, and when he spoke, his tone carried the respect that one warrior shows another. "Ma'am, if I may ask, what branch did you serve in?" "Army," Marissa replied, sitting straighter in her wheelchair. "Combat medic, 101st Airborne. 3 tours in Afghanistan." Steele nodded with the understanding that only another veteran could provide. 101st. Good people. I was Marines, Vietnam. Different war, same dedication." He looked back at Tyler. "Son, this woman saved lives while you were probably learning to tie your shoes. She's earned respect, not ridicule." The education was having its effect. Tyler wiped his eyes, looking around at the faces watching him. Faces that now showed disappointment rather than fear. "What can I do?" Tyler asked, his voice small and uncertain. "How do I make this right?" Steele exchanged a glance with Marissa. A silent communication between veterans who understood sacrifice and redemption. Marissa nodded slightly, giving her permission for what came next. "There's a veteran support group that meets here every Thursday morning," Steele said. "They could use some help. Someone young and strong to set up chairs, serve coffee, maybe just listen to stories from people who've given more than you know. Think you might be interested?" The offer was unexpected. A chance for genuine service rather than punishment. Tyler looked at his friends who were still hovering near the door, then back at Marissa and Steele. The choice before him was clear: continue down the path of entitled cruelty, or begin the harder journey toward becoming someone worthy of respect. "Yes," he said, his voice growing stronger. "Yes, I'd like that." Marissa smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. "Thursday mornings, 10 on Quack. Don't be late." As Tyler and his friends finally left the diner, their departure marked by silence rather than their earlier boisterous entrance. Steele and his brothers remained. The other patrons began to relax, conversations resuming in grateful murmurs about what they had just witnessed. Steele pulled up a chair across from Marissa, his massive frame somehow managing to convey gentleness despite his intimidating appearance. "You okay, ma'am? That was a rough situation." Marissa nodded, though her hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline and emotional toll. "I've been through worse," she said, then paused, "though maybe not in a long time. Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, we did," Steele replied firmly. "That's what we do. Protect people who need protecting, and veterans look out for each other always." He gestured to his brothers, who had positioned themselves strategically around the diner to ensure no further trouble. "We were heading through town when we saw the commotion through the window. Figured we'd stop for coffee and ended up staying for something more important." "I used to be able to handle myself," Marissa said, a note of frustration creeping into her voice. "In Afghanistan, I could run, fight, carry my own weight." Now you're different," Steele interrupted gently. "Not less than you were, different. I lost friends over there. Good Marines who came home changed. Some visible changes, some invisible. But they were still Marines, still heroes, still worthy of respect." He leaned forward, his voice taking on the tone of someone sharing hard-won wisdom. "The way I see it, you've got 2 fights now. The one you fought over there which you won by coming home alive, and the one you're fighting here, which is proving every day that you're still the same person who chose to serve others. Marissa felt tears building behind her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief at being understood by someone who truly got it. Some days are harder than others, she admitted. That's why we stick together, Steele said. That's why we don't let punks like Tyler make those days worse. One of Steele's brothers approached the table, a man with kind eyes and careful movements. Steele, we should probably get going. Road's calling. Steele nodded, but didn't immediately rise. Instead, he pulled a card from his wallet and placed it on the table next to Marissa's coffee. That's got my number on it, not just mine. It's connected to our whole network. Veterans, supporters, people who believe in doing right by those who served. Marissa picked up the card, studying the simple design. A phone number and the words, "Never Ride Alone," printed below the Hells Angels logo. You call that number if you need anything, Steele continued. Car trouble, someone bothering you. Just need to talk to someone who understands. We've got brothers and sisters all over this country, and every one of them would be honored to help a veteran. The promise felt real, in a way that official support services somehow never had. This wasn't bureaucracy or charity. This was genuine brotherhood, extended to someone who had earned her place in it. As Steele and his brothers prepared to leave, the diner's atmosphere had completely transformed. Where there had been tension and fear, now there was something approaching celebration. The elderly waitress refused to accept payment for their coffee, and several patrons approached Marissa to express their admiration for her service and their disgust at Tyler's behavior. You know, said an older man who introduced himself as Frank, a Korean War veteran, I've been coming to this diner for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like that. Those bikers, they did what the rest of us should have done. Marissa nodded, understanding the complex emotions at play. Fear, shame, and gratitude mingled in the responses of those who had witnessed the confrontation. Everyone wanted to be the hero, but few were prepared for the consequences that heroism sometimes demanded. Steele paused at her table one more time. That young man who was bothering you, Tyler, he might actually show up on Thursday. People can change if they want it badly enough. Do you think he will? Marissa asked. Change. Steele considered the question seriously. Maybe fear can teach, but shame is a better teacher. Today he learned both. Thursday morning arrived with autumn's first real chill in the air. Marissa wheeled herself into Murphy's Diner at 9:45, 15 minutes early for the Veterans Support Group meeting. She had been coming to these gatherings for 2 months now, finding in them the community she had been missing since her discharge. The group was small, 8 regular members, ranging from Vietnam veterans to recent returnees from Iraq and Afghanistan. They shared stories, offered support, and created a safe space for people who understood the unique challenges of transitioning from military to civilian life. At exactly 10 o'clock, Tyler Hoffman walked through the diner doors. He looked different, cleaner somehow, less aggressive in his posture. He carried a box of donuts and wore an expression of nervous determination. Marissa watched him scan the room, looking for her among the assembled veterans. When their eyes met, he offered a tentative smile and approached her table. I wasn't sure you'd really want me here, he said quietly. Everyone deserves a chance to do better, Marissa replied. The question is whether you really want to take it. Over the following weeks, Tyler's presence at the support group meetings evolved from awkward obligation to genuine engagement. He listened to stories of courage and sacrifice, learned about the invisible wounds that many veterans carried, and slowly began to understand the true cost of service. He started small, setting up chairs, bringing coffee, cleaning up afterward, but gradually his role expanded. He drove veterans to medical appointments, helped with grocery shopping for those with mobility issues, and became the group's unofficial coordinator for practical support. Marissa watched his transformation with a mixture of satisfaction and caution. She had seen too many people make promises in moments of crisis, only to abandon them when the spotlight faded. But Tyler's commitment seemed genuine, sustained by what appeared to be authentic remorse and a desire to make amends. "He's different," she told Steele during one of their periodic phone calls. "Not perfect, but different. Sometimes I think that day in the diner changed him more than it changed me." Steele chuckled on the other end of the line. Sometimes the people who need saving the most are the ones doing the bullying. Hurt people, but healed people heal people. 6 months later, Marissa sat in the same corner booth where her confrontation with Tyler had begun. But everything else had changed. The veteran support group had grown to 15 regular members, with Tyler serving as their volunteer coordinator. He had used his family connections not for personal gain, but to secure funding and resources for veteran services throughout the community. The transformation had ripple effects beyond just Tyler. His former friends, shamed by his example, had begun their own journeys toward better behavior. The diner had become an unofficial community center, hosting not just the veterans group, but other support meetings as well. Steele and his brothers still stopped by occasionally during their travels, checking on Marissa and the growing community they had helped protect. Their intervention that morning had been about more than stopping a bully. It had been about demonstrating that courage could be contagious, that standing up for what's right could inspire others to do the same. As Marissa sipped her coffee and watched Tyler help a newly returned veteran fill out disability paperwork, she reflected on the strange turns that life could take. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most can become the ones who help us heal. Sometimes the most unlikely heroes wear leather jackets and ride motorcycles. Real heroes come in all forms. From wounded veterans who refuse to surrender their dignity to leather-clad bikers who protect the innocent, to bullies who find the courage to change. In the quiet corners of a small-town diner, where the scent of black coffee mingles with the weight of unspoken struggles, we witness a profound truth. True strength is not measured by the legs we stand on, but by the dignity we refuse to surrender and the courage we find to protect it in others. Marissa Martinez, a combat medic who once raced through Afghan dust to save lives, now wheels through life with invisible scars deeper than any battlefield wound. Yet when entitlement and cruelty cornered her, mocking her sacrifice, twisting her pain into entertainment, she met it not with rage, but with grace. "Your words can't touch what I've accomplished or who I am." In that moment, she taught us that heroism isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the steady voice that refuses to break. Then came the Hells Angels, leather-clad guardians forged in their own fires of war and loss, who didn't need fists to command respect, only the quiet authority of men who know the cost of freedom. They didn't just stop a bully. They dismantled a worldview built on privilege, forcing Tyler to confront the chasm between his petty cruelty and the sacrifices he could never repay. And in the most unexpected twist, the bully became the bridge, his shame birthing redemption, his hands now setting up chairs for veterans, driving the wounded to appointments, proving that even the hardest hearts can crack open when held to the light of genuine accountability. This story whispers a timeless lesson. Hurt people, but healed people heal people. Redemption isn't a gift we withhold. It's a door we leave open, because change often begins not in perfection, but in the raw, trembling honesty of, "I'm sorry," and the harder choice to show up day after day to make it right. In a world quick to cancel and slow to forgive, let Marissa's unyielding spirit, Steele's protective brotherhood, and Tyler's quiet transformation remind us that real power lies in empathy, in standing up when it's easier to look away, and in believing that no one is beyond the reach of grace. So tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed or been part of, a moment where cruelty turned into kindness, where an enemy became an ally. Share your story below. Your words might be the spark someone needs today. And if this tale moved your heart, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join our Shadows of Dignity family. We're here to remind the world that every soul deserves respect. Every scar tells a story of survival. And together, we can keep these lessons alive.